So I'd like to thank you for joining me today. I love all your designs, so I'm super excited to have you on. Uh,
Thanks.
of course, and so for the first part, and to get us started, can you please introduce yourself for those who don't know who you are?
Yeah, sure. My name is Sotirios Livaditis. I'm a set designer.
That's awesome. And so, what was the moment when you realized that you wanted to be a set designer as a career, and how did that impact your journey till now?
Sure. My initial interest in theater was I actually was in acting. I wanted to be an actor. Um, just having done it in high school, and then I decided that I wanted to study theater. But another component with that was that I was always drawing. I was always interested in visual art as well, and um, um, when I was younger, I remember like there was a period of time where I wanted to be a film animator, and I would always just like draw and trace and try to copy Disney characters and cartoons, and was always interested in what kind of went into that media. And then at some point towards the end of my undergraduate college journey, I started directing, and I thought directing was really what I wanted to do. And at some point, I realized that where where my talents really lied and what I was really good at. And I don't think you should do something because, especially in theater, you should never do something just because you're good at it. You have to really want to do it. And I realized that when I was directing, what I was really always interested in was the space and how the space was configured and how the space kind of allowed the story to happen in a very particular way, and was really interested in that um, just in that process in general. I was also in college, was really interested in scenic painting. And for a long time, my job was painting backdrops for an event planning company. And then at some point, when I decided to move to Chicago, that's kind of how I paid the bills. That I was work as an overhire scenic painter. Um, and there's this old expression, jack of all trades, but master of none, and which I don't believe is true. I think that the more information you can get is the best. But at some point I realized that one of the difficulties that I had in my career was that I didn't really have like a title of what I wanted to aspire to. And after, doing some thinking, I realized that design was the thing that I wanted to do. I loved directing, and I loved imagining shows and shaping shows and working with all the different folks who were involved with it. But ultimately, what I really found that I disliked in the theatrical process was sitting in rehearsals.
Yeah.
And so, as a designer, I don't have to do that, but I still get to collaborate with everyone. I still get to imagine how the show, because it's not just about you know, doing research on, what did a 1940s parlor room in an English village look like, like it's much more about thinking about what the experience is and thinking about how physical space can help amplify emotional dramatic content. And that was really when I made that decision, that was really what got my juices flowing and what really inspired me, and also just happened to be what I was really good at, as well. That's where I decided to focus on set design. And so I was in my late 20s when I had this revelation. And then I decided to, go to grad school for it. And in 2014, I started at Northwestern, went through that program, and kind of like the rest is where, the last 7 8 years since I finished that program have been me following this career.
That's such a great journey. And so, has there been any advice that you've been given from another set designer, another performer that has really stuck with you throughout the years?
Ooh, I think the best one is that to never be afraid of a bad idea. I feel that so often, and I don't think this applies to just theater artists, but just any creative person in general, or anyone who's trying to do anything really. I mean, if you're trying to make something out of nothing, I a lot of what people see is the finished product, and they don't realize that process went through a lot of really terrible ideas to get to that good one. And sometimes a bad idea can very much in an unexpected way inspire a better idea. I think that the best thing you can do as an artist is to not necessarily give yourself the pressure of having to get the thing on the first go, but to allow yourself to be able to step back from something that you've created and say, is this working or is it not? I think that's a much more valuable skill than to know what it is on the first pass. I think that the better thing is to be able to critically look at something that you've made or something that a collaborator's made and offer either yourself or them criticism to constructively take people to the next step, into the next level.
Yeah,
So, yeah, don't be afraid of a bad idea. That's the advice.
yeah, that's great advice. And so, kind of following along with like inspirations, as a set designer or theater artist, who are some of your biggest inspirations?
Oh wow. You know what? It's so funny. The I think that one of my most concrete people that I've ever been a fan of was Todd Rosenthal. And that was one of the reasons why I went to Northwestern. And since then, I've been an associate for Todd on 25 productions. And it's so funny because I still think he's a genius and I still think he's amazing and he still continues to inspire me. And having been around him for so long, some of that shiny veneer has kind of worn off, and I just see him as a highly esteemed colleague and friend. Um, I'm trying to think of other designers who inspire me. Um, so funny because Walt Spangler is another designer who I like, who I also learned from at Northwestern. He was there for my first year, and has been I've been a fan and friend ever since then. I think that if I can think of any designer who I haven't worked with, who I'd love to work with, I think David Zinn would be a designer who really excites me, and his work really, I think it's really brave, it's really honest at the same time, and you just never really know what you're going to get with it. But it feels, sometimes I feel like when I look at his work, it tells a story without having to really look at anything else. It doesn't feel that necessarily that's representational of anything. It just feels so evocative about something. And that's something that I always try to do with my own work as well. And he's just such a cool person too. I follow him on social media, and every time I see him, I'm just like, you just seem like a really cool guy, who's really true to himself and something that we should all aspire to.
Yeah, for sure. That's beautiful. And so you've helped design sets and design sets for multiple shows, including the Lehman Trilogy, Year in Town, Eureka Day, and currently and most recently Huzzah. And so is there any set design that really sticks out and like man, like that one really is like one of my favorite that I've ever designed?
Oh wow, it's so funny because the things that you've listed off have either been um, bigger shows that I've done at larger theaters or really big shows that I've worked on as an associate. Like I was an associate designer on Eureka Day, as well as Purpose, which is also on Broadway that same season. But I'd have to say, like, the things that I get really excited about as a designer is when you're able to tell the story that you need to tell in as least gestures as possible. And what I mean by that is that if I can find a way to tell the story in an evocative, simple gesture that isn't necessarily representational of anything, but something that is like oh, I don't know if the audience doesn't really know what that's supposed to mean, but then it all kind of comes together. Like that adds to the discovery of the play. And I'd have to say that recently, can I pick two
Yeah.
for the same reason? Oh, so I'll pick two. Both of them were in tiny spaces, both of them in tiny Chicago theaters. One of them was a play called Out of Love that I did at the unfortunately now defunct Interrobang Theater Project. They're no longer around. It was directed by the wonderful Georgette Verdon, a director who I've worked with quite often. And and I really the idea for that show was is supposed to feel like um a bunch of letters and photographs were just pouring out of a letterbox, and that the actors just started performing on top of this pile of pages. And I really, really, really love that design because you just allow it framed it so you just have to focus on it, but we discover everything together, like what the set means. And I think one that I did this last summer was a play called Girls and Boys, that I did
I'm just
with
looking at that on.
yeah,
I have
yeah,
it pulled up. Yeah.
that I did with the Griffin Theater, directed by another pal of mine, Robin Witt. And that show is a it's a monologue, and so it's a one person show, and I don't want to say too much about it because if anyone ever has the opportunity to see that show, that production, I don't want to give too much away about what the meat of the story is. Um, but we did this sort of like this mirror set up above. So we kind of like did a copy of the set, but it was hanging from the ceiling, but it was dressed differently. And I it was just a really satisfying discovery because the investment in that production didn't go into thousands of dollars of materials or labor or whatnot. It was just more invested in the idea. And I think that's the common thread between the two pieces that I picked, is that I love big sets and I love giant sets, but I really love smart ideas that can be done really elegantly and simply. And not because it's easier for the production, but it's just cleaner. Like, I don't know. I think that no matter what you do as a designer, if you're working in theater, everything needs to be in service of the performance. And not to say that it's all about just acting and nothing else, but I feel like if it's not helping the story, if it's not allowing the story to offer the most maximum emotional payoff, um, then it's just I'd rather just not do it. Not so much I'd rather not do it, but I don't know. I wanna go see a show and have it be about a story, and I want to see a show and have it be about this. I want to have a transcendent experience, and sometimes stuff kind of can get in the way of that. And so I really love a design that can be done very simply, very elegantly, without a lot of distracting stuff.
Yeah, for sure. That's great. And so following the theme of like ideas and stuff, what is your process to designing a new set for a show that you just started to work on?
Sure. I mean, every show is different, and every show kind of, you know, to me, design isn't about, it is about creation, of course, but it's also about discovery. It's about finding what's been hidden and not necessarily trying to think of the best way to describe this. Like sometimes I feel that one way to approach a play is just kind of like the play takes place here, and so we're just going to kind of create this world. And for me, I don't think that's untrue. I think that's a great place to start. But I also just feel too, though, that sometimes the play asks you to be more abstract. Sometimes the play wants you to be more evocative. And so I think trying to figure out what that style, what the form content style of the piece is, and I hope that makes sense. But in terms of when you know what, first you have to like design. So okay, sorry, I'm going to go back. Design is art, but with a prompt. So you're trying to solve a problem. You've been assigned a task, and you're trying to figure out what happens around it. And I think that the first thing you need to do is ask yourself, what is the role of the space in the play? How will the space allow this to be the best play possible? Does it need a lot of scenery? Does it need little scenery? Does it need to be simple? Does it want to be evocative? Does it want to be literal? And a lot of designers talk about how like, oh, I hate realism. That's the dumbest thing anyone could ever say. I think realism is a choice. I think highly realistic sets can be exactly what the play needs, but sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes a lot of designers will rely on a realism crutch in order to tell the story. And I also feel too, another part of my process is figuring out what's in the play, but also figuring out what's not in the play. Like how sometimes people think that the design should be kind of like a mirror to the play, and I do look at it that way, but I also think that the space should be a complement to the play, which is all to say that a lot of my process is a lot of text work. I do a lot of work on texting. A lot of my process is in journaling. Well, I'll just kind of set a timer for 30 minutes and I'll write about how I feel about the play. I really want my designs to be, and I want to say, I don't like saying my designs because I think that it's influenced by a whole entire team of people. Um, but what I try for my designs to make is I'm more about the experience. So I want to I ask myself, what does the play look like? What does the play feel like? And what will leave the most space for the human imagination? I think that's something that's really big for me too, is not I think that in a lot of ways you want to meet your audience halfway, and at some point you want them to lean in and to engage a little bit, which is one of the other reasons why I think that sometimes you can get a lot more out of less when it comes to scenery, because I just feel like the experience is about of what theater can do is about imagination and not necessarily telling you exactly how to feel. I feel like you want to leave space for imagination, for conversation, for opinions, for feelings, for transformation, you want to leave space for all that stuff. And I think that all those things kind of put into the design machine is really what my process is about. Does that
Yeah,
make sense?
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I, I just talked for a while. I don't know if that made any sense at all to
No, yeah, that
anybody.
definitely makes sense. Yeah, that's a great process. And so, kind of moving along, talking more little more about like the set process. Do you ever like have any doubt in a set, but then when you see it built, you're like, that's it, that's what I wanted? And if so, how did you overcome that doubt?
I don't. And I'll tell you, it's very rare for me. Like usually the reverse happens. So I build models, is kind of how I do it, and I'm a pretty meticulous model maker. And so when I built the model for the set, I put a lot of work and effort into giving myself the closest representation of what the design idea is. And so I kind of go through all that doubt in the studio and not in the theater. Sometimes when I'm in the theater, um, I'll be like, here, this was a bad idea. And sometimes you just have to, in the same way you want to sit down with your bad ideas in the studio, you want to be able to sit down, look at it, evaluate it, um, and figure out how you can make it better. And every process is different. I will just say for myself that the problem that I deal with more often than not so much more often than not, but whenever I have doubt about a design, it has more to do with the fact that I've designed something, I've given it to the technical director, I've given it to the theater. Everyone's really excited about it. And then something will happen where like materials are much more expensive than they thought they were going to be. This happened when the tariffs came into play, and things were just much more expensive than what people had initially budgeted. And some people anticipated that by like saying, okay, well, we're going to reduce the budget to just to account for what might happen. Um, or a painter got sick and they weren't able to find a new painter, and like all these things can happen in a show, and sometimes it's just bad planning. Some theaters are just bad planners, to be plain and simple about it. And so when that happens, that's my least favorite part, is because when the full thing is made, when you're not looking at the model, when you're looking at the real thing, it is so much harder and it is so much more expensive to make changes and to make adjustments on that. Um, and it's just much more expensive too, which it's harder to have ideas. Whereas in the studio, when it's just the model, like you can build a new model if you're good at model making. Models, I don't mean to say models are easy. They take a lot
Oh,
of
I love
time,
making models. I
but
make
you can,
models of like Broadway
yeah.
shows. Yeah,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. It's my favorite part of the process. To
yeah.
be honest, I love the model making. I'll never stop doing it. I've been teaching myself how to use SketchUp, and that's another thing that's been fun and satisfying to me as well. But the thing is like the more time you spend on the model, and the more time you spend on being critical with yourself and sharing with your collaborators. And I don't just mean the director and the producer, but I mean also the other designers on the team. And the more you share, the more like everyone can step in and say, oh, think about this, think about that, think about whatever it is. And I think that's one of the great things about being a set designer, but also one of the burdens of a set designer is that everything goes into the set design. So like, the sound designer doesn't have to worry about making sure that there's, quick change areas.
Yeah.
The sound designer doesn't have to make sure that the colors complement each other between the sets and the costumes. So so I think a lot of times I really encourage young designers to share as much as they can with as many people on the team as they can, and not to feel like the set is theirs, even though they are the set designer, but that it kind of belongs to, and I feel the same way about all the design elements, that it kind of belongs to everyone in a group. I think one of my favorite um um sort of experiences to work with. And I will say that the company that did the play, Girls and Boys that I talked to you about earlier, it's a core group of people who I work with most of that group quite often. And we're always up in each other's business. We're always, and I make that sound like it's an annoyance, and it's not at all. But I trust these folks
Yeah.
to offer me notes just as much as I would give them a note on a sound level or on a transition or whatever. Like we're always kind of sharing with each other about about the other, respectfully and constructively, about what's going on. But I have to say, like, some a lot of really great design ideas come out of these meetings where I'm just sharing with the other team members. So so I just feel like how I deal with that is planning. Making sure that you give yourself enough time. A lot of that is the production managers to make sure that they curate the calendar so that you have enough time to execute all the things that you want to do. And um and just being real with yourself and trying ideas that removing. I think i think i think that if I could give anyone, any designer, any skill that would like encourage this, is just to be brave in the studio, to try things that you might not normally try, to allow yourself to be inspired by the world around you. I think that would be the one skill that if I could like download it to anyone who wanted to, including myself, is to just allow yourself to be uninhibited and allow yourself to be curious and allow yourself to embrace the 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 unknown and to not be afraid of the unknown and to forgive yourself if you come up with something that maybe not be the right thing, but that's just the next step in the process. Like the I think the young designers will say, oh, not to start all over, but the smart designers say, no, that's just the next step.
Yeah.
you know like you don't get pushed back to square one, now you're going on to square two. Like that's just the next step in the process, is having the bad idea and getting it all out there. Um, so I hope I answered the question. I know that I
Yeah.
kind of turned it on its head to
No, yeah.
reflect my own experience with it more, but usually when I'm working with a crew that can do it, I typically don't have the experience of not being happy with what I made. Sometimes I'll have regret about some choices that I've made, but you know, all you can do is just question, like, do we have the time? Do we have the money to fix what I thought was a much better idea than what it was? And that has happened before, but I tend to go through that anxiety in the studio, which is a privilege of the designer, of the set designer. Like lighting designers, they make their mistakes in public in front of everyone. I don't envy them at all for that. But with a set designer, you can have your bad ideas in private, and that's great and fine and exciting.
Yeah, for sure. And so, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh, wow. Oh. Um, right. It's not that I don't have one. It's just trying to pick the one that I would give for the sakes of this interview. I would say that if I were to give advice to my younger version, to my younger self, is I think it's I would try to instill that younger person with a with a stronger confidence. Like I think that I would try to encourage my younger self to be more confident. I think the big thing in terms of my professional life and my professional career, um, is that I would encourage folks to reach out to the people that they admired and to the people that they thought were kind of like their role models, professionally, creatively, however you want to say it. I think what I'm really trying to say is that I used to feel that I wasn't worthy of reaching out to a Todd Rosenthal or a Walt Spangler or someone whose work that I really loved and admired and would love to just kind of meet them and maybe assist for them or maybe just have a conversation with them. And I used to feel like I needed to have some sense of accomplishment before I did that. And I would tell my younger self to not worry about that, to just, whether you're a good designer or a bad designer, reach out to the people you admire and they're not going to if they say no or if they want to ignore you, they're not going to remember your name, they're not going to put you into some database somewhere that like don't hire this person. The worst, I mean, I find that creative people love talking about themselves. They love talking about their careers, they love talking about what they do because they typically really love what they do. And so I feel like the instinct is that yes is what they'll probably say. If you were to reach out to someone you admired and say, hey, I really love your work, can we talk? And a lot, I used to feel like I couldn't do that. And I would tell my younger self, yes, you can, and it'll be really, really good for you too, because you can get a sense about what this really is. I don't know, I feel like younger artists who like are your age and who are in either a high school or undergraduate college program, um, that in college they teach you to love what you do and they give you space to practice, but there really isn't a strong sense about what the professional world is like what you're doing as a professional. Like when your bread and butter relies on this and the roof over your head relies on you booking work. Like one of the things that I dislike about where I'm at in my own career is that I don't really have the luxury to turn down a job if they offer me a certain amount of money. Like I mean, there's like of course there's some hypothetical situations that I can think of at the top of my head that, no, I would not take a job, working with neo-Nazis, for example. I'm just like, but in the real scenario, um, if a theater company comes at me with a play that I really dislike and that I don't really have an interest of doing, but they offered me a certain amount of money to do it, I'd have to do it. I couldn't afford not to do it. And that's just like one of the things, my partner's an actor, and sometimes that they don't tell people who are studying acting about how to book commercials, and sometimes you have to book these things that you don't think that are very quote unquote artful, but that's how you pay the bills and that's how you eat. And so I think that seeking out mentorship, to really get a strong sense about what the industry is and what it means to be a working artist as opposed to just not just an artist. Like if you're interested in theater, you can do theater on any level. I find no shame in if you want to do community theater and then just work your regular day job. I celebrate that. I used to do that, but I feel like if you want to do it full time, I wish that I had, and not that it would have, I don't think it would have changed how I wanted to pursue my career. I think that it would have just offered me better advice about how to go about navigating what what it means to be a full-time working theater artist.
Yeah, for sure. That's great advice. So that actually wraps up the interview today. I'd like to thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me. It was nice meeting you.